call the June 22nd, 2022 City Council meeting, City Council regular meeting to order. Everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Carey?
Present.
Chilson?
Present.
Parker?
Yes, here.
Hutchings?
Here.
Ruffridge?
Here.
And Nelson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda? Ms. Hutchings, thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Are there any changes to the agenda or consent agenda? Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. And at the request of the administration, I'll move to amend Informational Memorandum 2022-003 by adding an additional memo regarding changes to the monthly payment estimate for the assessment as backup information to Resolution 2022-027, and I request that the Informational Memorandum 2022-003 remain on the consent agenda.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Just a second here. Are there any objections to adding the memorandum to Informational Memorandum 2022-003 to remain on the consent agenda? Seeing no objections, it is done. Would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Approval of minutes, June 8, 2022, council meeting minutes. New business ordinances for introduction, Ordinance 2022-018, amending Soldotna Municipal Code, Chapter 2.07, Office of the City Clerk to provide for the city clerk to be supervised by the city manager, and amending Chapter 2.08 to recognize the department, and amending Chapter 2.28 regarding job descriptions, introduced by Councilmember Parker. Public hearing to be scheduled on July 13th, 2022. Ordinance 2022-019, accepting grant funds from the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $360,000 in the Parks and Recreation Capital Project Fund for the Soldotna Riverfront Redevelopment Master Plan. Introduced by the City Manager. Public hearing to be heard on July 13th, 2022. Other items, Informational Memorandum 2022-003, setting a public hearing date of July 27, 2022 for Resolution 2022-027, forming a special assessment district for Whistle Hill sewer utility improvements, introduced by the City Manager. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on any of the items just read by the clerk? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the chambers that would like to speak on the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to Zoom, and looking at Zoom, I see no hands raised there. Having no one wishing to speak, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda is back before the council. Are there any council objections to approving the agenda and consent agenda? Seeing none, the agenda and consent agenda are approved by unanimous consent. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is public comments and presentations. Items other than those appearing on the agenda, 3 minutes per speaker, 20 minutes aggregate. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand. If you would like to comment, app users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the chambers that would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to Zoom, and I see no hands raised on Zoom. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is item 5, Assembly and Legislative Reports. Are there any representatives from the borough or the state in attendance who would like to speak? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on their telephone. Mr. Cox, please come forward then.
Thank you. Tyson Cox, Assembly Representative for Soldotna. First off, I want to congratulate Soldotna on the approval of the Riverfront Redevelopment Grant. That's pretty awesome. I'm super excited about that, and anything I can do to help, I will do, because I think it's a fantastic move in the right direction. Also, what I was going to do is talk about a few things on our last two agendas, just so that to keep you a little bit aware of what's going on. There's been a lot of movement going on, some of it big, some of it not so big. In the June 7th meeting, mostly for awareness, is just to know that we did approve the 2023 fiscal year budget, and that did include a 0.2 mill rate decrease. So we went on the borough end of the mill rate. We went from 4.7 mills to 4.5 mills, and that was approved, which still we were told will produce an $800,000 increase in revenues through property tax. The next one is ordinance 2022-12, and this is an ordinance about the Emergency Service Communications Center Advisory Board and reactivating the board. I know Stephanie's aware of that. I just wanted to be very public about that and say that there were some changes made by Mayor Pierce in that. So if you have not looked at it, I do have it with me if anybody wants to look at it, because there are definitely some changes in that group itself. The next item. The next item that was introduced and will actually be heard on July 5th is ordinance 2022-23. This is increasing the amount that can be collected in sales tax from $500 to $1,000, exempting residential rentals over 30 days. Like I say, it will be heard on the 5th. The reason I'm bringing it to you guys is obviously that could have, not in itself effect on the city, but it may drive the city to make some decisions later on if that becomes something that goes forward. Note that this is just to get it on the ballot, which would mean that it would still go to voters. I personally, at this point, am not going to support this. I don't think the timing's very good. We have a lot of bond issues coming up, not just one, but at least two for this area, and then not to mention anything that may come up from the city. And so I personally don't think it's a great time for that. I am not against raising from 500 to 1,000. I just don't think right now is the time to do that. The next one was, we still are working on the 2021-41 ordinance, which is the material sites ordinance or rework of the code. That probably will not come back to us for group work until probably late summer is what I'm guessing. So it is not something that will happen this summer. I will be surprised if we see something come forward before next spring. And so, but it is something we are working on, but we have had a lot of meetings for that. And then our meeting we just had last night, there was a couple things I wanted to mention in there as well. We did pass the $65,550,000 bond, not the bond itself, but to put it before the voters so that it will be on the ballot. So that will be seen on the ballot. I do not have every item with me on here today. I know there's two big ones for the area of Soldotna, being one with the school and one with moving the school district offices, which comes out to, it was close to 40 million in that alone, almost. It's real close to that. The next item was Mr. Bjorkman and myself sponsored some changes for the Planning Commission application process. This doesn't necessarily affect the city in itself, but it does affect, because we now have 2 seats for this district, which if you live in the city, you are in the district. And it does affect the outside of the city seat. And I just mention it because right now that seat is, we just confirmed it last night, a person for that seat that is not in the city, not saying they will do a bad job, or not in the city, I'm sorry, not in the assembly district area of mine, the 4, which is district area 4, which is the Soldotna area, has to be an outside of the city person. The person that is now sitting in that seat is not from that area. But I will say no one applied from that area. So I would just ask that if you know anybody that wants to apply from the areas outside the city, please talk to them. You have 3 years now, so you got a long time to kind of deal with that. With that being said, I want to make, this was kind of the bigger reason I came tonight, is we had a lot of discussion, which never really happens, but it happened last night. We had a lot of discussion about the confirmation of appointments for the Planning Commission. And the reason we did is it was suggested that 2 of those people not be confirmed and be tabled for this time. And the reason for that is because it passed at the legislature, some of the wording in the code now allows for a 9-member planning commission that does not have to involve appropriations for the balance between city and borough areas. You know, for me, being the representative for this area, please reach out if that's something that we need to discuss. I do think it's important to get the feel of where the city would like to go on that. I do think that's coming forward probably sooner than later. Everybody's pushing for that pretty hard. And my argument last night is that is not what the code is right now. We need to pass these positions until that happens, and then we can figure out where we're going to go from there. But for now, that's where it's at. But I will say, you know, put it on the radar if that's something that is important to Soldotna. The next one was we were only introduced, so our next meeting, we will be discussing central emergency services and the possibility of a new CES building, Station 1 in Soldotna. The area that it's looking like is over there, pretty much surrounding the existing OEM offices. There are some properties that aren't included, some that are, but it's in that area right there. And that is looking, we had introduced last night a $16.5 million bond that would go on to the, for voters to vote on this coming election cycle.
Go ahead.
Do you know, does that include Bishop's Attic land?
As of this time, it did not.
Thank you.
Not that one or the one right behind it. Pretty much it was the other ones that were in that. In fact, part of what did pass last night was a resolution to go forward on the purchase of those other properties. And so if you looked at the resolution, if you go into this online and look at the resolution, you'll be able to look at exactly which properties those are. And that was all I had for this, so I guess if there's any other questions.
Any questions from the council? Ms. Hutchings?
There was. The hospital, and we did approve that, and it was for, I'm not looking at it, 9.12 million to purchase the 2 operating rooms that are the, Surgery Center in Kenai has the 2 operating rooms in Kenai. And the reason that was discussed of why that was important is the way that they work now is if it's under real close to 1.5 million per operating room, they don't have to follow certain regulations. And what those regulations mean is they go into this big study, and the shorthand of that big study means that we don't need any more than 4 operating rooms, which is already what the hospital has. And so with the advice of the board, what we were told is the reason to do that is because what that allows for them to do is to buy these 2 operating rooms, which they would not be able to build because you can't build an operating room right now for 1.5 million. And so being that it was the only way to increase the operating rooms, which we were told is the reason we were told that that would be a good idea is because what that does is that makes some more outpatient areas that we can take and have people go to do their outpatient surgeries from the hospital. And because the blocks, and I'm not the ace on it, but I know that the blocks of scheduling, it gets very difficult. And so being able to have some more of those blocks open was a very powerful thing for the hospital to have. So we did approve that. So that should be going forward.
Any other questions from the council? I have one, I guess. The $65 million bond, is that all for the school district?
think there was one item on there that said KPB/KPBSD, and it had to do with, I want to say it was $5 million towards the maintenance buildings. Other than that, the rest of it was.
So there's only going to be one item on the ballot for $165 million budget, bond?
It'll be 65 million, over 65 million for that bond issue. And that is like 99%. You could say 100% only because the maintenance crews do most of the work for but it is for the schools or for the school district because, 18.5, I think it is for moving the school district offices to the old prep house. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, so there's only going to be one bond issue.
There will for that, but if you're in the CES area, there will be a separate bond for that.
Okay, and that's the
16.5.
Right, so it'll be roughly $81 million worth of bonds on that.
And last night we had a discussion because there was one thing I changed on how the proposition is going to be written, is it had said something to the effect of per 100,000, that would be $25 we're only talking about the school district bond, it would be $25 per 100,000 for residents if the state goes back to funding to 50 to 70% of that. And then after that it said, or if they don't, it will be $45. And what I did is I changed that to the opposite. And the reason I wanted to do that is I think it's a little bit more transparent to say it's actually going to be $45 per 100,000 for each resident. Hopefully, if they change that back to the way it used to be, then it might be $25 for each resident. So what I'm telling you is for every 100,000 you have for personal or real property, is you will be paying another $45 for every 100,000. Should the bond pass, correct.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, and I know I said it earlier, but I'm going to be taking off to go down to the park. I saw your guys' agenda. It doesn't look very long. Hopefully I'll see a few of you over there.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next agenda items, number 6, public hearings, testimony limited to 3 minutes per speaker. First one is ordinance 2022-017, amending Soldotna Municipal Code, Chapter 2.48, disposition of surplus city property to update the procedures for disposal of city property, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to enact? Mr. Nelson.
Motion to enact ordinance 2022-017.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. We brought this forward, some recommended changes to our existing code, really to update and modernize this section of code. For many decades, this code on how to dispose of surplus property has not been revisited or changed. And the changes we're requesting are to better align it with how we're currently doing those surplus sales, as well as to provide and codify some additional flexibility. Right now, the code references live outcry auctions, and for the past several years, we've been using a government website that does the online auctions, where we've been really successful, and I think we've been really pleased with that service. We can set minimum bid prices, we advertise ahead of time, we allow people to come inspect the property ahead of time, and then we notify people of when those bidding windows will be. It's worked really well for us, and so moving to that online platform, I think, is going to be something that we're interested in doing in the future. The existing code was very specific in terms of advertising and noticing, particularly referencing the newspaper in a certain number of days. We'd like to have flexibility to advertise in a way that we deem appropriate, given the items that are for sale. And this is in part to get away from one big sale per year. And to give you an example, our IT manager brought this up and asked if we could have more flexibility. He may have laptops or desktops or printers that are part of our normal replacement cycle, and it would be nice to be able to offer those for sale immediately rather than set them aside and wait 8 or 10 months for the city for the rest of the items to be identified for a once annual sale. So in part, it's to provide us additional responsiveness when we have surplus items to get them out there to the public. And I think that's a benefit and an improvement in the process. The other thing, when researching other municipal codes, we identified as a really common thing in other codes that didn't exist in our code was some dollar threshold that above that amount, it would require the city council to authorize the disposal of that item. And I think that also is a good public process, and so we've added in this code any item above $25,000 in value, rather than being authorized by the city manager, it would be authorized by the city council. And I think we would anticipate bringing an action memorandum or a resolution once staff had identified those items that may be in that, may meet that criteria. That would come to the council, and you would have the final say on us disposing those. It doesn't happen very often, but we do occasionally have a grader or a piece of equipment, heavy equipment, that is likely to be in that range in terms of value. And again, I think that's an improvement on the process to allow the council to be the entity that approves those sales. Other than that, we are asking for one proposed amendment. That memo is in the packet. This was just recognizing that when we were doing this research in the code, we didn't include a provision that allows for even greater flexibility when it's intergovernmental transfers. That is a common theme in other places in our code. So for example, if we were going to sell land, we have the authorization per code to waive certain procedures if we were going to directly negotiate a deal with another city or the borough or the state. And so I think that this would be an appropriate addition to this code, giving us flexibility so that if we had items of value that we could identify another intergovernmental agency that would benefit from that, we would not be bound by these same disposal requirements to go through the same process if we were going to work with another unit of government. And with that, I conclude my report, and I would be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the chamber who wishes to speak on ordinance 2022-017? Seeing no one here in the chambers, I'll look at Zoom, and I see no hands raised for Zoom. Public hearing is now closed. Having no one else, the item is back before the council. And is there a motion to amend as requested by the administration? Ms. Hutchings.
At the request of the administration, I move to amend ordinance 2022-017 by addition of a new subchapter 2.48.050 to read as follows. 2.48.050 Intergovernmental Transactions. The city manager or the city council may waive procedures of this chapter to sell, lease, donate, or exchange surplus city property with the United States, the state, or an Alaska public subdivision when, in the judgment of the city manager or the city council, it is advantageous to the municipality to do so.
Is there a second?
I would second, but it should have read Alaska political subdivision, not public.
Okay. Yeah, you missed a couple of words. City Clerk, do you have that?
Would you like me to read back the
Yes.
motion?
Please.
The amendment to ordinance 2022-017 is by addition of a new subchapter 2.48.050 to read as follows. 2.48.050 Intergovernmental Transactions. The city manager or city council may waive procedures of this chapter to sell, lease, donate, or exchange surplus city property with the United States, the state, or an Alaska political subdivision when in the judgment of the city manager or city council it is advantageous to the municipality to do so.
Thank you. Are there any council comments on the amendment? Seeing none, are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is approved by unanimous consent. Are there any additional council comments? Mr. Carey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Manager, did I hear correctly, did I hear you say that this will bring us into compliance with what we're already doing? Did I hear something along those lines, that some of the changes in this will then codify what it is that we're already doing?
Mr. Carey, through the mayor, I did say that, and I think I was referencing our use of that online portal versus live outcry auctions conducted by an auctioneer. And I think our code provides for that. We are currently meeting all the notice requirements in the code. So the notification about the time and place in which we're doing that, we're meeting that currently. This would provide additional flexibility so that in the future we may choose, if appropriate, not to notice in the newspaper for certain items or advertise them in a different way.
Go ahead, Mr. Carey.
Thank you, and I thank the manager as well, in that it would concern me if I thought that administration was not following the code. Now, I can certainly understand there can be emergencies, and also you always have the right to come back for the council and say, can we make some type of exemption? And so it concerned me a little bit if that's what we were doing. But I certainly support this, and I thank you for your comments.
Any other council comments? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Chilson?
Yes.
Parker? Yes. Hutchings?
Yes.
Ruffridge?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Thank you. Ordinance 2022-017 has passed on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next items on the agenda will be item agenda 7, new business. That will be resolution 2022-026, supporting efforts to increase voter awareness of upcoming elections, introduced by the mayor, Vice Mayor Parker, and Mr. Chilson. May I have a motion to adopt?
I would move to adopt Resolution 2022-026.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Report from Vice Mayor Parker or Councilmember Chilson?
I'd be happy to defer it.
Thank you. I think you have the memo that we wrote in your packet. The purpose of this is to, and the reason I thought it should not be on the consent agenda is just to, again, if there are people listening to this, to bring awareness that we are having elections. And this year in our area, we will have 4 elections. We just had the special election. In August, we will have the special general election for a congressional seat, and then we will have the state primary. In October, we will have a city election, and then in November, we will have a general election, the state general election. And people oftentimes say they weren't aware that there was an election. And it's to help remind people, educate them on the dates, time, and location for upcoming elections with the intent to get more active engagement and participation from the public. And, you know, we all would love to have more public come and participate in our meetings and let us know their opinions on any and all issues. The cost to do this is already estimated not to exceed $4,000, and the city can absorb these costs in the approved operating budget for this fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year. As you'll see in the memo, voter turnout has been terrible. Particularly our last city election, we had 11.65% turnout. The average over the last 10 years for city elections has been 19.8%. And I read an article in this last special election that we just had, that this is, and it was a mail-in, it was the best voter turnout since 2014. So in 8 years, and it was just over 27% that mailed in the ballots. So that's the intent. I hope you will support this and that we can move forward in working with the city clerk and the borough, get these notifications out, and through all social medias, the radio, sending out flyers, just reaching out as much as we can. Thank you.
Mr. Chilson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Vice Mayor Parker covered the majority of it. I would just like to expand on it, that I was really excited to see this brought forward before our council tonight, and I again encourage all of you to support it. I think local elections, not just local, elections in general, but I like to put focus on local just because I think they often go under the radar, and they have such an impact on our lives that people don't realize, because from my perspective, it seems like a lot of people tend to get caught up on national and state politics. But just looking at things that we do here at a city, that, the development of our city, taxes, the upcoming field house that we have, there's just so much that we're doing that are important actions here in the city. And I would like to see a higher level of voter participation that we've had. It's been this trend that's been spiraling downwards. And I think any efforts that we can make to correct that, and not only just increase voter participation in general, but just getting new voters out there that haven't historically been involved in the election process in the past. I think that we're all familiar with, you have the base out there that tend to be a little bit older, and they have the time to go vote, and there's definitely, I think, a younger generation out there that hasn't been exposed to that or really made efforts to do participation in this, and I would love to see outreach in that regard. One comment I would make is, in addition to just making the public aware of the elections, the dates and times they're occurring, but also make them aware of their rights when it comes to elections. A lot of people don't realize that if they happen to be working a 12-hour shift that day and it kind of overlaps with the period that the polls are open, they have a legal right to get leave from work to go vote. And maybe that's something that we should be incorporating into this. Again, I thank everyone for their support for this tonight, hopefully, and I'm excited to see this move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. I have a couple of comments. I think this is very, very important. I have not, I shouldn't say have not. I have missed one election since I've been old enough to vote. So I've gone through a lot of elections. And the one that I missed was a bond issue, and it was just something that went right over the top of my head. I knew it happened, but it didn't make it. I think it's very important that everyone votes, especially right now in this day and age. There's a lot of things happening in our city, our community, in the borough, in the state, and nationally. And we need more people to get out there and take the time to vote. If you're working, you can get time off from work. If you're not working, you've got plenty of time to make it down to a voting place. The mail-in ballot that we just completed, I thought it was a very simple process. I'm kind of disturbed that there was so many that were rejected, and maybe it was a misunderstanding on how somebody had to witness it. I'm not quite sure. But we need to get more people out there, And, I hate to, I'd like to just see it double, go to 40 or 50%. I'd like even more, but, we can get as many out there as we can at this time. So, having said that, we'll move on to public comments. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the chambers that would wish to speak on Resolution 2022-026? Seeing none, I'll look at Zoom, and I see no hands raised. Having no one wishing to speak, the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we get closer to July 4th and we talk about what it is to be an American, what it is to believe in democracy, we need to keep in mind that there is no free lunch. as the son of someone who was killed in combat. Again, we have many people who have shed their blood so that we have the right to go and vote. The idea of how many people should vote, it is irresponsible for any citizen to not vote, or not make every effort they can to vote. We have many methods by which people can, again, cast their vote early if that's necessary, or if that works most advantageously. I don't remind people that local elections are where you have the most influence by far. For everyone here, we're all aware that there have been many elections settled by one or two, and in very rare cases, even by a flip of the coin, because the vote's been exact the same. Local elections are the most important in terms of the efficaciousness of each individual in the community to their vote, how much it counts. And so again, I just want to say I certainly support increasing voter awareness of every election. I would hope that every person would see it as their responsibility as being an American to make every effort they can to vote. And as long as we're increasing voter awareness, I think it's very important that we include the processes that we use. And I am particularly proud of all the election workers, from the clerks of the city or the borough, but also the precinct officers and those who man the polls, both before the election in terms of the absentee part, but also on the day of the election. Overwhelmingly, these are individuals who are just giving of their time. They believe in the process. And again, they spend, 8 to 12, sometimes even more hours of that day just making sure they've been properly trained, they have the input, but they have the attitude that they believe in the country. And they want to be sure that, again, the elections are done appropriately, that everything is accounted accurately as they are. And so I have to say, listening here yesterday and the day before of some election workers being threatened is just abhorrent to me. It is undemocratic. We need to support all of our election workers, marvelous people who've done it year after year after year. We need to be sure that everyone does know when elections are. We want to be sure that people do vote. And part of that is that you have a responsibility to know who's running and what they stand for, so that your vote counts. You are an informed voter. And so again, I very much support this resolution. I think the timing is excellent on it. And I would, and I support everyone saying it'd be nice to see doubled and even tripled the amount. I'd like to see everyone vote, but primarily, I hope everyone understands that having the right to vote is part of the democratic promises and the gifts that the Constitution provides for all of us. And I hope everyone will vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Are there any other council comments? Mr. Cholson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One other bit I'd like to throw out there is just a deep appreciation for the League of Women Voters and our local organization and the effort that they do in engaging the public and getting them to participate in the election process. I think we've all observed in recent years just the tremendous amount of misinformation or just lack of information in general that comes with each election cycle, and just the partisan divides that we have. And I think there's something incredibly special about this organization, and that you have participations from all political parties coming together to be this neutral third-party body that puts politics aside and is just there to just educate people and just, here's the information, you make your decisions, but do it in an informed manner, and please participate in our democracy. And that's just a very unique thing in this day and age, and I deeply appreciate the efforts that your organization makes, so thank you.
Any other council comments? Saying none, we'll call for the vote.
Vice Mayor Parker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hutchings?
Yes.
Ruffridge?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Chilson?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Thank you. Resolution 2022-026 passes on a 6-0 vote. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is number 8, Mayor and Council reports. I will start off with, if I can find it here, a proclamation. Whereas Charlene Tautfest volunteers extensively for organizations in Soldotna, the Kenai Peninsula Borough, and the state of Alaska, and whereas Charlene serves on the Soldotna Planning and Zoning Commission, Soldotna Airport Commission and Kenai Peninsula Borough Planning Commission as the Soldotna City seat, and whereas Charlene has held leadership roles on the Alaska Mental Health Board as chair, the Peninsula Community Health Service as president, and the Alaska Primary Care Association Policy and Advocacy Committees as chair, and whereas Charlene serves on the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education, Alaska Coalition of Housing and Homelessness, Alaska Psychiatric Institute Governing Board, and Alaska Primary Care Association Board. And whereas Charlene is the Soldotna Rotary Club president and has focused on children with Rotary Cares for Kids, organizing donations of birthday bags to the local food bank, and expanding the program by bringing it to the other local organizations to get monthly birthday bags donated to the food bank. And whereas Charlene was recognized by First Lady Rose Donlevy with the First Lady's Volunteer of the Year Award on May 17th, 2022, and whereas Charlene is exceptionally committed to Soldotna, the Kenai Peninsula, and the state of Alaska. Now therefore, I, Paul Whitney, Mayor of City of Soldotna, on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of Soldotna, do hereby recognize the outstanding volunteerism by the dedicated citizen of Soldotna, Charlene Tautfast. And I commend and thank Charlene for years of selfless service to the citizens of Soldotna and Kenai Peninsula Borough and state of Alaska. Charlene.
He's gonna be the president soon.
I'll let them know.
I'll let them know.
Well, Kenai Elks.
Oh. Should be the Soldotna Elks. Oh, that's a... Okay, back to my other report. As I emailed out to everyone, and actually our city attorney did also, the ruling on the fishery issue. It was a good ruling. The zone is now open for fishing, commercial fishing this year. And if it takes as long as it did the last time, they'll probably have another 10 years worth of meetings before they finally come to another decision on what to do. But at least the fishing season is open for them. And that's all I have. So I'll move on to council reports and boards and commissions. Soldotna Airport Commission, Vice Mayor Parker.
And I thought Charlene was here to give the Airport Commission report. So we did meet last week, and two areas of focus. One was airport access, and then discussion around the winter ground maintenance procedures and snow removal and process and next steps. Great discussion, and it was the first time I recall having members of the public coming to an Airport Commission meeting. I would defer to Kyle or Charlene if they had anything to add.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District, Mr. Zarneski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The KPED met last Thursday, and one of the things that I was thinking Mr. Tyson would report on was the increase in funding that is going to be made available to that organization. So they typically have a $100,000 request going into the borough annually, and this year they requested $150,000, and it was granted. It was a unanimous decision by the Assembly. Our executive director, Dylan, reported that also KPED has been assisting in the formation of a regional broadband task force to take advantage of potential federal funding and improve, of course, our coverage and access to technology. They had their first meeting. That was held on June 1st and included discussions on broadband equity, access, and existing infrastructure and programming. One other item of discussion was the board gave direction to Tim to explore options on KPED's 19-acre parcel. The current campus there at KPED includes a 13-acre parcel where the building and the offices, the incubator, all of those buildings are on this 13-acre parcel. Immediately to the north is 19 acres, which is undeveloped. So the board directed Mr. Dillon to explore options, possibilities for that in the way of potentially leasing it, selling it, looking at different ways to increase cash flow to the organization. 2 new officers took their places. Rusty Swan is our new president. He took Todd Smith's place. And Liz DeMoss is the vice president, and she took Bruce Richards' place. Last, Ryan Foster is leaving the board and taking a position in Homer. And that is the end of my report.
Any questions for Mr. Zarneski? Vice Mayor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I heard a rumor that the Kenai Peninsula is now the second largest growing area in the state, and this came from KPED. Was that reported on at the meeting?
It was not reported on, that was not something that either brought up at the meeting or in other discussions.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Zarneski, for your report. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 9, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. A couple of items I'll just restate briefly. We touched on during the work session, but we received notice that 3 of the 4 water and wastewater projects that we submitted to the congressional delegation were forwarded to the subcommittee for consideration for funding this year. And that was 3 projects on our 5-year capital plan, including biosolids dewatering and pH control of our effluent, and then some improvements to our headworks building. So we're very excited that Senator Murkowski identified those among the numerous requests she received to forward to the subcommittee, and we'll be following that process. Hopeful that some of those critical needs will be receiving federal funding. Also, as we noted, the Economic Development Agency has made their official announcement for our riverfront redevelopment project, and that is also many years, long time coming. John Zarneski is going to be spearheading that project. We're excited to get kicked off. We've got an 18-month time frame. The clock is now ticking since the paperwork is signed, and he'll be reaching out, soliciting professional services for consultants with expertise in riverfront planning, redevelopment, economic development, small business support. And we're really excited to engage with the landowners and also the public as we reimagine what's possible on that stretch of riverfront in our downtown. And I think that has the potential to be transformative in a way that we're excited to see how that plays out, but probably can't fully imagine at this point. Excited to get that going. We have 2 open positions we're advertising currently, wastewater treatment plant operator, and that's flexible and range from someone who's new provisional operator up to the higher levels of certification. And for the first time in 7 years, we are hiring for a police officer. So we now recently had an officer who will be moving on, and we're really happy for Officer O'Connor. His last day was yesterday. But it's the first time in 7 years that we have not been fully staffed. So we're currently advertising for a police officer at the Soldotna Police Department. And that position is posted on our website along with all others. And we're excited, hopefully, to get some talented folks interested in coming to move here and working with us. I was out of the office the last 3 days, but I'll check with the HR manager, and hopefully tomorrow or soon I can make an announcement about the new police chief. So we were waiting for the final steps of that process to be concluded, and I anticipate I'll be able to share with you, the council, and the public some more information about our police chief in the immediate future. And that concludes my report, although I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is 10, public comments. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the chamber who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, we'll go to Zoom, and I see no hands raised. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, item 11, council comments. Mr. Chilson.
No comments this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to comment today on how very, very important our sidewalks are. Last couple of months, I've been doing a great deal more walking, And it is interesting just how many people are out every day, early in the day as well as late in the day. I get to be out both times. And it's been kind of fun the last few days. And I want to applaud the city workers because I go by Parker Park at least twice, up and back twice each day. And we've been watching to see what all the little signs that went up are about. And today they are filled. It is wonderful. There is a walk a story. And according to what it says, so I want to applaud the library and the person who's done these. Again, on like the 17 different little portals, there's pictures, again, of a story. And what a wonderful activity to have. And again, assuming I read correctly, each week there's going to be a different story to walk and read for, obviously for children, but even for old children like myself. And just a number of us have been debating, what are they going to put in those? And again, different people, they thought they were going to be pictures. I have assured a few people there are not going to be pictures of the council members going up at the park. And again, I'm afraid, that might not go over well. But maybe some, it would go over wonderful. But the primary thing is just how nice the parks look when they get everything mowed as they are now, particularly at Parker Park, and I'm sure at all the other parks as well. It is just so nice, and they are so used. That's a critically important part of the physical health as well as the emotional health of people in our community. And so I want to thank the city staff, and I want to say Parker Park is wonderful, although we have, again, unfortunately, Spruce Park beetle. But again, the library, thank you that you've given us a new activity now for every week, and I hope everyone gets out and they read each of the posters, and they have these wonderful drawings with identifying the animals and again, the people and the flora and fauna within them, and just wonderful stories. And so it's just really nice as we add and enhance what it is to be a resident of Soldotna.
Mr. Nelson.
And I'll just echo that. I was passing by, and I think I saw the street crews restriping or painting things, so it is certainly nice to see things being spruced up, and thanks to the city staff for doing that.
Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I think there's been at least a little bit of attention brought to it, but I had the opportunity to meet one of our local gold medal winners in the park last week. He was sporting 2 gold medals, but he was hiding them in his backpack. And I just happened to read the story in the newspaper that morning about the gold medal winners, and I saw his name on his backpack. He said, you have gold medals with you today? And he gave me a grin like, I do. And so I got to see gold medals for the first time. So I would hope that the city would maybe have an opportunity to maybe give a proclamation to these young men who went and represented Alaska well, Daryl and Josh, and brought back gold medals, 3 in total. So congrats to them, and I think Alaska fared pretty well in the Special Olympics. So exciting times for them, and they're cool people. So if you've never seen a gold medal, they are heavy. Actually, that's the reason he wasn't wearing them, is he said they hurt his neck. So it's pretty awesome.
Ms. Hutchings.
Well, I would just like to thank Barbara Jewell for all of her work of being a poll person. I have gone and I vote every time. I'm a little bit like you, Paul, and you always see Barbara there. So thank you so much for all the years that you have put into that. And on that note, go enjoy the sun.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Just briefly, we will have a resolution at our July meeting for Daryl, and maybe he'll bring his gold medals.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, executive sessions, and there is no reason for one. Next item is one little announcement I'll make. Happy birthday to my twin grandkids. They both turned 10. And meeting announcements. July 6, 2022, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at 5:30. July 7th, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting, 5:30 p.m. And July 13th, 2022, City Council meeting at 6 p.m. And those meetings will take place here in the City Council chambers. Seeing no other items on the agenda and nothing else before the council, we are adjourned.